I lost tens of thousands of dollars doing this with sports cards. But today, I'm not going to tell you not to do it. Rather, I'm going to teach you how to do it the right way, the safer way. Well, what is this that I'm talking about? What did I lose tens of thousands of dollars doing? Buying the cards of unproven rookies and prospects and speculating and taking chances and getting my butt handed to me when those cards became worthless because those players didn't pan out. But there is a way to play that game more safely. There is a way to continue to buy those rookie cards and those prospects cards and not be in danger of losing your butt, at least not quite as much. And I'm going to tell you how next. The Geoff Wilson Show is brought to you by Arena Club, the official home of slab packs. Now available every day, slab packs offer an exciting way to collect graded cards with confidence. Plus, every pack comes with an instant offer to buy your slab. Don't miss out. Explore the latest slab packs and more by downloading the Arena Club app. Just search Arena Club in your app store and use promo code SCI20 for 20% off your first purchase. Danger, danger, danger. I like Michael Penix. I want to buy Michael Penix cards. You guys know Michael Penix is soon to be the second-year quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons. He's an exciting young player. He showed flashes of potential during his rookie year when he had some opportunities last year to start when Kirk Cousins had some injury issues and wasn't fully panning out. And now he's going to be heading into his second year with the Falcons. The Falcons, of course, are my hometown team. And I'm excited about this quarterback. And I think he's got potential. And I want to buy his cards. But we've been down this road before. I went down this same road a few years ago with Desmond Ridder, another Falcons quarterback, another player who showed some promise in his rookie season and then was getting handed the reins to the team his second year. Another player who I felt showed some great signs and could potentially break out. And you probably know, if you've been watching the Sports Card Investor channel for some time, that I spent $30,000 buying some of Desmond Ridder's very best cards in existence, including both of his Prism Black 1-of-1s. And today, I still have those cards, and they make really good coasters to put my coffee on, because that's probably approximately what they're worth. Maybe a few more dollars than that. They're actually still worth something, certainly to Cincinnati Bearcat fans, because Desmond Ridder was a great quarterback there. They still have some value, but nowhere near the $30,000 worth of value that I paid for those cards. So, as I'm thinking about putting some money into Michael Penix, I have to remind myself of the danger of investing in prospects, of investing in rookie quarterbacks, because of course this is not just a story about Desmond Ridder and Michael Penix Jr. This is a story about so many others. And I've had some other famous misses like Lonzo Ball and Will Grier, players who I put some money into, who I thought could have promising careers, and certainly hasn't panned out that way. I have no doubt that everybody listening to this show has put some form of money in at least one player that didn't work out over the course of time. It happens to everybody. Some people, it happens to a lot more, because some people are really focused on buying the cards of the younger players. They get excited about the rookies. They get excited about the prospects. And look, it's exciting. I love it. And I'm sure there's already people in the comments right now who have typed out buy the GOATs, buy vintage, ultra-modern is crap, speculating on rookie quarterbacks or baseball prospects or NBA rookies. That's a fool's game. Everybody's going to lose money. Don't do that. Just buy vintage, just buy the GOATs. You know what? That actually is good advice, but that's also not for everybody. Because I hate to break the news to you, but there are definitely a large segment of collectors that think vintage is boring. And they're not interested in the old stuff. And buying the GOATs, even Jordan, is a little boring too. Because they get their rush from being able to buy the prospect who then gets called up to the majors and has a 3-home run game, or buying the rookie quarterback who has breakout performances and becomes the next Jaden Daniels. That's where they get their excitement and their rush from. So I hear you that buying vintage and buying GOATs is a better, safer, long-term investment. I would agree with that. But I will also tell you that's not for everybody. And simply saying, oh, buy vintage and buy the GOATs and that's my advice and all your ultra-modern is crap, that's not fair to say. Because now you're taking your style of collecting, your style of investing, how you prefer to approach it, and you're casting that on everybody else. And one thing that is true about the hobby is the hobby gives so many different pathways for how people want to approach it. Some people just love the ultra modern. And I got to say, the Kabooms and the Downtowns and the Color Blasts and the Radiating Rookies and the Helixes, those cards are more fun. The Crystallized, I love those cards. They're cool cards. There's a lot of innovation in the card world that's taking place right now, just like there was in the late 90s with all the late 90s inserts that some people like. And I totally get the fact that all of the young kids walking into Cards HQ, and we have, hundreds and hundreds of kids that come here all the time for trade nights every week in the aisles of the shop. They're not looking at vintage. They're not. Very few of them are. Maybe a couple here and there, but that's not what they're going after. They want Jaden Daniels. They want Bo Nix. They want Drake May. That's who they want. They want Michael Penix Jr. In baseball, they want Paul Skeens. They want Ellie De La Cruz. They don't want Willie Mays and Mickey Mantle. And maybe they should. Okay. Sure. If they're thinking about it long-term and investing, okay, but that's not what excites them. That's not what interests them, right? And it's not just kids. It's adults too. There's plenty of adults that have gotten into the sports card hobby in recent years that want the shiny, ultra-modern stuff because that's what they're most drawn to. And you see it when you go to a show. Go to the Dallas Card Show. 90+% of the dealer tables are going to be the shiny, ultra-modern stuff. So stop with the advice to everybody that you should just buy vintage and you should just buy GOATs, because while that is good long-term investing advice, that advice is not for everybody. So today, I want to talk about how you can buy the cards and invest in the cards and collect the cards of those speculative players, but do it in more of a safe manner. That's what we're going to talk about today. And by the way, it is the rush of seeing your player on the top 5, the rush of having bought that prospect's cards and now he's on the top 5 cards. That's a cool thing. And that's something that should be celebrated in the sports card hobby. And you hear all of the naysayers who will tell you that all of these cards go down and all these prospects and these rookies never pan out. And that's not true. While I lost money on Lonzo Ball and Will Greer and Desmond Ridder and a host of others, you know who I made a lot of money on? I mean, I'm talking tens of thousands of dollars. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I was buying a lot of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander back in 2019 and 2020. I've cashed out of most of it now. I still have one of his big cards, I think, but most of them I've sold out at this point. I made a lot of money on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. People who, before this baseball season, were buying Jacob Wilson, Jack Caglione. They did Pete Crow Armstrong. They just made a lot of money right? People who were buying Jaden Daniels early last football season, they made a lot of money. Like, this is very possible to do, right? How about Halliburton? People who were buying Tyrese Halliburton a year ago, 2 years ago, even early in this season, people who were buying Tyrese Halliburton, they just made a lot of money. So you can make money buying the speculative cards, buying the rookies, taking the chance, but it is a lot harder and it does have a lot more risk. So let's get into my tips, my advice. I'm going to give you 10 tips for how I would approach it if you want to buy those prospects, those speculative players, those rookies. So here we go. Tip number 1, first and foremost, recognize you are going to lose money most of the time. Hopefully, you will be right sometimes. Hopefully, for every Lonzo Ball you buy a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, right? And you don't have to be right even 50% of the time. Oftentimes, you can be right less than 50% of the time, but the gains you can make on that one player whose cards went up 300 or 400% will offset the losses on 3 or 4 players who you missed on and you sold at 50%. So it is absolutely possible to make money as a cumulative, and a lot of people do it, dealing just in ultramodern, dealing just in prospects, dealing just in rookies, but recognize there will be a lot of the players that you pick who you will lose money on. So you probably don't want to go heavy into any single one. Diversification when it comes to investing in these speculative players is important because you probably will be wrong more than you are right. So some diversification will absolutely help you. Tip number 2, set up an investment allocation when you're approaching your sports card portfolio. So if you are thinking of sports cards as anything more than just, I want to have a cool looking collection, you need to set up an investment allocation the same way you would with other financial investments like a stock portfolio. If you are thinking, gosh, I would like to make some money off of my cards over time, even if you don't care that much, even if you don't truly consider yourself that much of an investor, you still probably want your collection to be worth more in 5 or 10 years than it is today. And certainly, if you are an investor, if you are in this partially or fully for the money, then you definitely want your cards to be worth more in a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years than they are today. If you were investing in stocks, if you were investing in other forms of investment, you would likely set up an investment allocation that would be equivalent to the risk that you are willing to take as an investor. So typically, if you're dealing with a younger investor, you're typically going to set up a investment allocation for them that's going to have a very high percentage of stocks, for example, and a low percentage of bonds if you're looking at investing into equities, right? And within that stock portfolio, you're probably going to be taking a chance on some tech stocks and biotech and different areas of the stock market, which are more prone to risk, but also potentially have a higher upside. Because if that investor is younger, they've got more years to go. So, and if they, assuming they don't need to access their money, assuming this is, money that's going into a retirement fund, you can be a little bit more, you can accept more volatility and you can accept more risk. Now, if you have an older investor that is closer to their retirement date, that all switches, right? Their portfolio is probably going to go a lot greater percentage bonds, and it's probably going to go a lot greater percentage of safe stock investments. They're probably buying the blue chips. They're probably buying the big name companies that are, safe, long-term, proven stock holds. And they're probably not buying the small cap stocks and the speculative stocks, to the same degree, right? And so think about your risk tolerance when it comes to your sports card portfolio and set it up the same way. Ideally, part of your portfolio would be going into those GOATs and to those vintage cards, to those iconic, sought-after, long-term proven cards in the sports card market. Ideally, some of your money should be going into that. Now, how much of your money goes into that depends on your investing style, depends on your preferences, depends on what you like. If you want the most stable, safe, long-term portfolio of sports cards that is likely to appreciate slowly, but appreciate over time, then you should put 100% of your money into vintage and into GOATs and those kind of iconic type cards, right? But if you like a little more risk, a little more volatility, you're willing to accept a little more volatility, you like a little more excitement, and of course you like the game of the ultra modern, then you're willing to put more of your portfolio into that kind of stuff. But you have to know, you have to set your portfolio up based upon the risk tolerance that you have and the risk levels that you're willing to take. So think of your card collection as a portfolio if investment is part of the reason why you're collecting. Tip number 3, buy well. Buy well. How much money you will ultimately make with the sports cards you sell comes down in part to how well you bought those cards, right? How much money you paid to get into those cards will affect how much profit or loss you eventually have when you sell those cards. So if you are buying the cards of the speculative rookies, the prospects, where there is going to be a lot of volatility and some of those cards are going to drop price and you do risk losing money, one way to protect yourself somewhat is to buy well. If you're able to buy those cards at 70% of current market value, then that card could drop 30% and you're still break even, hypothetically. That doesn't take into account maybe marketplace fees for selling the card, right? But hypothetically, you're break even in that scenario I just described. So if you buy well, it helps protect you against some of the market downside that can come by the players you're buying not working out. So buying well is very important. And if you want to learn more about how you can buy cards at 70% or 80% of value and do a really good job buying, go listen to last week's video. Because last week I did a whole video with Ryan Van Oost, our head of buying here at Cards HQ. The whole topic of the video was how to buy sports cards really well at good prices. So go listen to that when you're done listening with this one. And if you're buying cards at 70%, it's a lot easier to make money with cards over the long run. Number 4, if you are going to buy the speculative players, there's 2 types of categories that I would prefer you buy. And so my tip number 4 is to buy the more proven of the speculative players. So within the world of the prospects and the speculative players, there is different levels of risk. If you're buying a player who was the number 1 overall draft pick, they've got a greater chance of panning out than if you're buying the quarterback who was taken in the 5th round of the draft, right? Now, of course, you're going to pay less for the quarterback taken in the 5th round of the draft, so that does come into the equation quite a bit. But the player who's the number 1 overall draft pick, they got a greater chance of success. The player who showed promise in their rookie year, the player who's got a clear path to the starting role, the player who the organization seems very invested in, the player who maybe won Rookie of the Year or Offensive Player of the Year or any of those types of awards, those players have at least a better shot of success. They've got a better shot. That certainly doesn't mean they will be successful. And it does mean their cards are more expensive. So that's the downside of it. But they've got a better shot of success. So if you're taking the chance and you're buying the speculative players, at least buying the players at the high end of that kind of speculative pool of players gives you a greater likelihood that the player will be successful. But also potentially greater financial downside if they're not successful. So it increases your risk, but it increases the percentage chance that they will actually pan out and be successful. And the other thing that it does is it also probably increases the longevity of that card before it goes to zero. Because you could have a player, like a great example is like a Trevor Lawrence. He really hasn't panned out. His stuff has definitely gone down quite a bit, but there's still a lot of buyers of Trevor Lawrence cards. There's still a lot of people that believe in him. There's still he still very clearly is the quarterback, is the starting quarterback in Jacksonville. Like, he's not getting benched. Like, they are invested in him as their starting quarterback. He still has multiple years of opportunity ahead of him to prove that he can be the guy and he can be that superstar that he was in college. So because of the fact that he was the number one pick, because of the fact that he was the super touted guy, even though he hasn't performed quite to the level that people were hoping, he's still getting chance after chance after chance, and there's still a good number of buyers of his cards. So the nice thing is that if you invest in the top of the list of all the speculative people, that card will have more longevity before it may eventually go to zero if the player does not pan out. So buying at the top can be a good strategy in terms of like the list of the rank order of all the speculative players who you're considering. Now, my tip number 5 is actually the opposite of that. Also consider buying from very low on the list because those cards are going to be super cheap. You can sometimes get lucky. You can sometimes find the Tom Brady or the Brock Purdy, whose cards were next to nothing when they came out because they were the 7th round draft picks, right? Their cards, they were overlooked. They were in the rank of quarterbacks who were being speculated on that year. They were way down the list, and therefore their cards were transacting for very little. So if you can find that guy, you can buy their cards for cheap, and you have the potential of an upside that is 10x, 20x, right? If that player gets hot because of how little you had to buy to get into that player in the beginning. So what I like considering kind of buying the top names, and I like considering buying some of the extreme value names at the bottom of the list. It's actually the middle of the list that scares me a little more, right? And that's what I'm saying. Consider kind of avoiding that if you're going to be investing in these prospects or these speculative players. That's my style. That's my advice. Either go for that value at the bottom of the list or go for some of the top name guys who are going to have some staying power, even if their performance isn't wonderfully great right off the bat. Somebody like Desmond Ridder, who absolutely squarely was in the middle of the list, that turned out to be a bad buy. Why? Because his leash was short. Desmond Ridder was a 3rd round draft pick. He wasn't a number 1 overall pick. He wasn't a high 1st round pick. If he was, the Falcons certainly would have given him more than one season. They would have given him more than 1 or 2 seasons as their starting quarterback because they would have invested at that level into him. Instead, he was a 3rd round draft pick. So they were willing to give him the chance of starting for most of a season. And if he wasn't working out, they were also ready to quickly move on from him, cut him. And then that was going to be the end of his ability to ever have a starting job in the NFL. Yet because he wasn't a 7th round draft pick or an undrafted free agent, his cards were still pretty expensive. So he was kind of in that middle no man's land that can be really dangerous for investing. And I got burned on that one a lot. But a lot of those cards that are kind of in the middle, those are the ones that I worry about when you're looking at investing in speculative rookies, prospects, all that type of thing, right? Okay, number 6, buy liquid cards. Buy liquid cards. By the way, including base cards. Don't be afraid to buy base cards. Base cards are often the easiest cards to move off of. Graded base cards. PSA 10 Prism base cards. PSA 10 Topps Chrome base cards. They're often the easiest cards to sell. Online especially. Maybe not at a card show. People aren't like in-person trade nights card shows. People aren't as enamored by those cards. But online, on eBay, those cards transact every single day at a very reliable price. There's very consistent price history when you're looking at base cards. So don't be afraid if you're buying into a player and you're only doing it for investment purposes or speculation purposes. You know that these are cards you're buying just to flip in 6 months or a year because you got a hunch on a player. Don't be afraid to buy the base cards. That can often be the most efficient way of getting into a player at a set price and then being able to get out of that player knowing that you're going to get a market price when you go to sell those cards. They're very liquid and they're transacted all the time. Short print cards are also very desirable. And that actually leads me into tip number 7, which is buy short print cards that are very desirable. Downtowns, kabooms, color blasts, radiating rookies. Topps is trying to up their game in this area, right? Image variations. They've got new ones like crystallized, and we'll see how that kind of stuff plays out over time on the top side. But on the Panini side, it's very clear. Kabooms and downtowns. This is the interesting thing. No matter how bad the player performs, there are still buyers for their downtowns and kabooms, and they won't drop below a certain price level because people still love the cards. And in some cases, people are looking to build complete sets. There are a lot of people out there that like to build complete sets of downtowns and kabooms in particular. And so if somebody's building a complete set, they still need that Desmond Ridder rookie downtown. They still need it, right? And even if they're not trying to build a complete set, there's people that just love the downtowns, even for players that didn't perform very well. So if you buy short prints, they're never going to fall below a certain threshold. Now, that doesn't mean you won't lose money on it. Of course, you're going to lose money on it. Of course, if you bought that Desmond Ridder downtown a few years ago and went to go sell it today, you're going to sell it for a lot less. But it will never go to zero. It will never become worthless. There is a floor price that it will eventually hit and kind of stick around at, because that's what those set collectors or those people who just love buying downtowns in general are willing to pay. So buying short prints and base cards are actually pretty good ways to go when doing this type of speculation. Yeah, something to think about for sure. Number 8, don't be afraid to sell. In fact, definitely sell and take profit off the table when a player does get hot and starts to perform. Every single week in the top 5 show, when I do the top 5 show on Sports Card Investor, I say oftentimes the cards featured in this show, these are the hot cards in the market right now. We're reporting what cards are hot in the market, and oftentimes the cards that are featured in the show can drop in price in the weeks or months after the show. We see that happen a lot. Players don't stay hot forever. Well, with some exceptions, Ohtani and Judge, and some, in recent years, and some others perhaps, but most players don't stay hot forever. Most players kind of peak and then they have a little bit of a falling off period when something happens. And, a recent example of that is CJ Stroud, right? CJ Stroud had a phenomenal rookie year. His cards were the hottest cards going in the football card market by far back in 2023. And then 2024, his second year isn't as good. He struggled some. The Texans weren't as good of a team. His numbers weren't quite as good. They weren't quite the same. And his cards dropped in value a decent amount. So if you've got the hot guy, if you've got Jaden Daniels cards right now, don't be afraid to sell and take money off the table. If you got Jacob Wilson right now, if you got Jack Caglione, Pete Crow Armstrong, if you've got Tyrese Halliburton, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, don't be afraid to sell and take your profits off the table, because if you don't, then you're going to have trouble making money on speculative players ever. If you're not willing to sell when they're hot and take your profit off the table, then don't expect to make money on this game, right? You got to sell when they're hot. You got to get your profits off the table, because that's going to hopefully more than make up for the losses that you are certain to encounter if you are investing in the speculative players. Losses happen, so take the profits when you can get them. And on the other hand, my tip number 9, sell and cut losses before your losses become bigger. Sell and cut losses before your losses become bigger. You will absolutely have losses. There will absolutely be cards that will go down. And when that starts to happen, if you are ready to move off a guy, if you no longer believe in him, if you think that, this guy's really like kind of blowing his shot here and I don't know that he's going to get another shot, sell. Don't fret about what you're in the card for. That's the sunk cost fallacy. Too many people make that mistake. Too many dealers, you see dealers at card shows make this mistake all the time. They've got a card at their table of a guy who's cooled off a bit in the market and they got a price at $300 and you go up to him and say, most recent sales in that card were $150. Would you take $150? And the dealer will say, no, I bought into it at $280. So at $280 is the lowest I would go. Well, guess what? That $150 that you're offering that dealer today, that could very well be more than that card's going to be worth in 3 months or 6 months or a year. That card that dealer paid $280 for, that card could end up at $50 or $20 or $5, right? At some future point in time. That dealer, the fact that they're gripping onto that card because of what they paid for it, that is a massive mistake. Huge mistake. Sunk cost fallacy is the scientific term for what that mistake is. That's a bias. That's a human bias. Don't do that. Don't worry about what you paid for a card. Worry instead about where that card is today and if you still believe it's a good investment at its current price or not. If you believe the $150 that card is worth today is not the most optimal place for that $150 to be invested, then sell that card for $150 and go put that $150 in another card that is a better investment. Don't worry about the fact you paid $280 for the card. That thinking will get you hurt worse. That thinking that you're going to hold the card and hope that it goes back up because you paid a lot more than what it's worth today, that will kill you. And if that's how you're thinking, then don't play this game of speculative rookies and prospects and all this stuff because you're going to get hurt. Just don't do it. Like seriously, you've got to be willing to cut your losses. You've got to be willing to sell out of cards and say, I'm accepting my loss on that, but I want to get out before it goes down even further. Don't be afraid to sell. All right. Tip number 10. We're going to end on this note. If you can buy cards that are speculative in nature, that are these chances that you're going to take, but if they're also cards that have some meaning to you, it's even better. If you can invest in what you love, that's a great win all around. Look, I don't know if I'm going to end up buying a high-end Michael Penix card before the season starts or not. We'll see what I do. But me buying a high-end Michael Penix card, I will have more excitement and attachment to that card than I would if I bought Drake May, Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels, any of the other young quarterbacks. Why? Because Michael Penix is my guy here in Atlanta. I'm going to go to a Falcons game this year. I'm going to see Penix play. I'm going to cheer for him. I'm going to probably watch every single Falcons game this season on TV. I'll be cheering for Penix all through the season. So buying a Penix card, I've got more personal connection to that card. That card means more to me. So if I'm going to buy a Penix card and I'm going to lose out on that card and that card's going to go down and it's not going to pan out, at least I had that experience with a guy in a team that I got some personal connection with and I had some personal pleasure rooting for. And it'll be a shame that he doesn't work out and that, the Falcons have to find another quarterback and I've lost money on the card. All of that will stink. But at least I had the connection. At least that was a guy who I was cheering for, and therefore taking a chance on his cards, I was able to invest in something that I love. And what happens if it does work out? What happens if Penix does become a superstar? What happens if the Falcons do really well under Penix? Then I've got the card of the guy who I'm cheering for every week. And it was both a really good investment and a super cool card that has a lot of personal meaning to me that ties into my life. That is a win-win. That's the ultimate win-win when it comes to sports cards, right? If you're able to buy a card and it's a player who you love and they do really well and your team does really well and then your card financially does really well, that is the ultimate win-win in sports card collecting and investing. So if you're going to take a chance on the rookies, if you're going to take a chance on the speculative players, give a little bias to the people who you love, to your hometown team, because with that bias can come a little more reward if things go your direction. All right, guys, what did you think of the episode today? What other tips might you have for speculating and rookies and prospects? Let me know in the comments on YouTube. And of course, these full-length Geoff Wilson Show episodes, they are available on YouTube under the Geoff Wilson Show. They're also available on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. Search for the Geoff Wilson Show. Subscribe everywhere so you can listen to the show on the go. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon with the next one. Take care.